Hi everyone, it's Books with Keely Mary and welcome to my channel. As you can probably tell by the title of this video, I'm actually doing my first ever monthly wrap-up today. I haven't really done wrap-ups on my channel before because I didn't really feel like I was reading enough at the start of my channel to be able to do a good wrap-up. Since the start of this year, I've been only reading on average about 3 books per month, but this month I read 6 books, which really to some people isn't that much, but lately for me that's a little bit more and I feel like I can do a better wrap-up. With that, I'm just going to begin. I believe the first book I actually read was If Cats Disappeared from the World, and this is a Japanese translation. I believe it'd be considered literary fiction or contemporary. I'm not entirely sure the difference between those genres. I kind of saw this book all over Instagram and I was very curious about it. The title's very intriguing. It's kind of what it sounds like. There is some magical realism. Basically, this man finds out that he's dying and he's given a deal where he can extend his life by a day, but each time he does that, something disappears from the world. It kind of answers the question of what would happen if these seemingly small things disappeared from the world, what would change about our daily lives, how would we feel about that. So it is supposed to be a little bit more philosophical, but I just felt like it wasn't as deep as I was hoping it would get into the topic, and maybe that's just due to me having higher expectations than I should have. But overall, I did relatively enjoy it. I think I gave it like 3 stars or like 3.5 stars, something like that. I also did read a manga this month, which was Jiu Jitsu Kaisen, I think it's what it's called. So I don't really read a whole lot of manga. Really, the only manga that I read is Junji Ito. I feel like so much happened in it and I don't know if this is really common in manga. So I read it within like an hour, but I just feel like so much happened that I just don't really remember a whole lot of the plot. So I don't really know how I would rate it, if I'm being honest. I think personally I'm just not used to this type of manga. At least I'm more used to the Junji Ito kind of stuff. And then I also did read The Daughter of Dr Moreau. If I'm being honest, I didn't really like it that much. It was based off of this I think classic novel where this man creates hybrid creatures that are half human, half animal. It delves into a lot about the ethics. This book actually goes into more of his daughter, which I don't know if that's a character in the classic book, but she is in this book at least. One thing that I really didn't like about it is, so it was supposed to be a sci-fi, but the sci-fi elements weren't really that fleshed out. Like the whole thing of the book was that he's creating these hybrids, but the process of creating these hybrids wasn't as detailed as I feel like it should have been. I still have so many questions about that process, honestly. I really felt like the sci-fi elements were lacking. And then also there's kind of like a weird, like this might be a spoiler, but there's also kind of a weird, like, not really a romance per se, but there was this man who was older. He basically lived with the family and he worked with the family. Ever since the daughter was very young, he would have had to have been older because he was already divorced by the time that he started working with them, and like I said, she was very young at the time. When she gets older, he falls in love with her. I don't know, it's just kind of weird because he watched her grow up. And then also another character said that he's like her uncle, which was just really gross. Yeah, it was just really icky. I hated it. So then I also did read The Poppy War, and I did like a whole reading vlog on that, so I'm not really gonna go too in detail about that. Overall, I did really enjoy The Poppy War, but I mostly had an issue with some of the pacing. If you want to find out more about my thoughts on that, you can check out that vlog. I also read Intimations by Zadie Smith, and so this was a collection of essays written, I believe, during the pandemic. So it was a lot of reflections on things during the pandemic. And so it talked a lot about time, how we fill time, art, death, systemic racism was also a big topic. I don't really feel like this genre is really for me, or I feel like this maybe would have hit a little bit closer to home had I read it during the midst of the pandemic. I feel like I can't really accurately critique this because, like I said, it's not really my genre. It's not a genre that I'm really used to. I don't really read essays. I think she makes a lot of really great observations, and I really like the way that she describes like just normal people in her life, people that you would assume wouldn't really have a huge impact on your life, or just kind of like almost what you would maybe consider like minor characters in your life. I don't know how else to describe it, but like neighbors that she talks to every once in a while, or people who she sees at work but doesn't really interact with, and she just kind of like makes observations about them. Last but not least is probably my favorite book that I read this month, and it's actually a poetry collection. It's called Lean Against This Hour. So it's translated to English from Farsi. I know it's translated to a bunch of other languages as well. So it's written by an Iranian author, and he talks a lot about how war has impacted him and his family and the people around him. It's not from a political standpoint at all. Like, I know a lot of people don't really like reading things that are too political, but it's mostly just how war in general has personally impacted him. I can't even describe how much I love this collection. His way of writing is just so kind of unique in a way. I feel like this has to be one of my all-time favorite poetry collections. I don't know if I can put into words how much I love this. His way of talking about the world, and personally it evoked feelings in me of like loneliness and isolation. I don't know, I can't describe how much I love it. It was so, for me, it was one of those books where it just makes me remember how much I love reading and how powerful words can be. I don't know, I can't, if you take any recommendation from this video, it should definitely be this. It was absolutely incredible. It's definitely a very hard read though, so obviously if you're in a space where you don't think you can read it, just maybe sit this one out. So that's kind of all the books that I read in September. Now I kind of want to talk about a couple of books that I'm currently reading, because it was Truth and Reconciliation Day on September 30th. I'm filming this on October 1st. So I kind of want to just talk about a couple of the books that I found from the library, because they had a whole category of like Truth and Reconciliation books and books by Indigenous authors. I'm currently loving the book that I'm reading right now, and there's a few other books that I want to read. It's called Niska, and it's by Jordan Abel. He talks about how being an intergenerational survivor of residential school impacts his identity and has impacted him, the trauma that's caused him and his family. One thing I found really interesting was how he talked about his first introduction to Niska knowledge was through a white anthropologist's work, and a lot of it he found out was incorrect, and this anthropologist was also stealing totem poles from Indigenous communities. He includes pictures and pieces of interviews and transcripts. It's amazing, and I can't wait to read more of it. Another book that I've been wanting to read for a very long time is called Starlight Tour, The Last Lonely Nights of Neil Stonechild, but I have on hold for like 10 weeks, so I'm not going to be able to get to it for a while. This is something that not a lot of people know about. There was a thing called these Starlight Tours that happened in Canada. Cops would pick up Indigenous people in the middle of winter and drop them off on the middle of the highway, leaving them to freeze to death. And I think the last occurrence of this was in like the 2000s, like early 2000s, I think. It's talking about this man who did freeze to death. Actually, he was a kid. He was like 17 years old. So I think that's a really important read. I'm also going to start reading this play soon by an Indigenous author, which is called Dead White Rider on the Floor. I don't read a whole lot of plays, and this one is supposed to be satirical. These characters, these kind of stereotypical representations of Indigenous people, realize that they are sort of this caricature of an Indigenous person, and they become sentient. I think they kill the writer or something, or they try to get revenge on the writer in some way. So that's really all I had to share today. I want to thank you all for watching, and please make sure to like and subscribe if you would like to see more content from me.